The Great Hall of the Galactic Concord was filled with beings from 100 different worlds. Some floated in the air, others stood on legs made of crystal, and a few existed only as shimmering clouds of energy. They had gathered here for thousands of years to decide the fate of entire civilizations. They considered themselves the wise elders of the universe, the keepers of peace and order among the stars, and they were about to make the worst mistake in galactic history. Ambassador Kate Morrison walked through the massive doors with her head held high. She was a small woman by human standards, barely 5 feet tall, with gray streaks in her dark hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. Behind her walked Commander Jack Harris, a tall man with broad shoulders and a face that seemed carved from stone. They were the only 2 humans in a room full of ancient beings who had seen empires rise and fall. Kate stopped at the speaking platform and looked up at the High Council. High Arbiter Xylox sat at the center, his body made entirely of living crystal that glowed with soft blue light. He was 3,000 years old and had never once considered that a species as young as humanity could teach him anything. "You may speak, human ambassador," Xylox said. His voice echoed through the chamber like wind chimes in a storm. Kate took a deep breath. "High Arbiter, members of the Council, I come to you today with a simple request. The Vrakthan Empire has attacked 17 of our colony worlds in the past 2 years. They have killed more than 400,000 human civilians. Men, women, and children have been slaughtered in their homes. We are asking the Concord to enforce the peace treaties and stop these attacks." A ripple of murmurs passed through the chamber. The Vrakthan were known throughout the galaxy as fierce warriors. They had sharp claws, thick scales, and a culture built entirely around hunting and conquest. Most species simply avoided their territory and hoped to be left alone. Envoy Threll of the Emirian Collective, a being that looked like a floating jellyfish made of purple gas, drifted forward. The Vrakthan are a proud species with ancient traditions. Perhaps your colonies were built too close to their sacred hunting grounds. Perhaps this is simply a misunderstanding. Kate felt her hands tighten into fists at her sides, but she kept her voice calm. "With respect, Envoy, there is no misunderstanding. The Vrakthan broadcast their attacks live to their homeworld. They make sport of killing our people. They take trophies from the bodies of our dead. That is their way," said Council of Wren, a being made of living metal who had not moved from his seat in over a century. "We cannot judge one species by the standards of another." Jack Harris stepped forward. He had been ordered to remain silent during the diplomatic session, but he could not hold his tongue any longer. "Counselor, I was at Colony 12 Echo when the Vrakthan came. I saw what they did to the people there. I carried the bodies of children who had been torn apart for entertainment. Do not tell me this is simply their way." High Arbiter Xylox made a sound that might have been a sigh. "Commander, we understand that humans are an emotional species. This is well documented. But the Concord cannot intervene in every territorial dispute. The Vrakthan have been part of the galactic community for 10,000 years. Humanity has been here for barely 2 centuries. Perhaps you should learn to accept that you are not the center of the universe." Kate felt something cold settle in her chest. She had hoped it would not come to this. She had prayed that the Council would see reason, that they would honor the treaties they had signed, that they would protect the innocent as they had promised. But she had also prepared for this moment. "High Arbiter," she said slowly, "I want you to listen very carefully to what I am about to say. Humans have a warning that we give to those who threaten us. We say, do not make us angry. This is not a boast or a threat. It is simply the truth. We are asking you one final time to help us resolve this situation peacefully." Xylox's crystal body flickered with amusement. "Ambassador Morrison, I have studied your species extensively. You are short-lived creatures driven by chemical reactions in your brains. You create art and music and spend half your lives in something called sleep. The Vrakthan have conquered 1,000 worlds. What could humanity possibly do that would concern anyone in this chamber? Kate looked at Jack. Something passed between them, a silent understanding born of shared grief and shared resolve. Then she turned back to face the council. "Then we will handle this matter ourselves," she said. "And I pray you will forgive yourselves for what comes next." She turned and walked toward the doors. Jack fell into step beside her, his boots echoing on the ancient stone floor. The council members watched them go with expressions ranging from confusion to contempt. "Emotional creatures," Xylox said dismissively. "They will learn their place in time." Councilor Vren shifted slightly in his seat. "Should we not at least investigate their claims?" The death toll they mentioned was significant. 400,000 is nothing, Xylox replied. The Vrakthan lose more than that in their internal hunting festivals each year. Humanity will accept their losses and move on, as all young species do. They have no other choice. But as the chamber emptied and the lights dimmed, one of the lesser delegates lingered near the doors. She was a Phylixian, a species known for their ability to read emotional energy. Her fur was standing on end, and her large eyes were wide with something that looked very much like fear. "What troubles you?" asked her assistant, a young male of her species. The Phylixian looked at the spot where the human ambassador had stood. "When she delivered her warning, I felt something. An emotion so strong it nearly knocked me off my feet. Anger? No, it was worse than anger." The Phylixian shivered. "It was resolve. The kind of resolve that does not bend, does not break, does not stop until its purpose is fulfilled. I have felt it only once before, from a mother protecting her young from a predator." Her assistant frowned. "But the humans are weak. Everyone says so." The Phylixian turned to leave, her tail wrapped tightly around her body for comfort. "I am not so sure anymore. I think perhaps we have made a terrible mistake. And I fear we will not understand how terrible until it is far too late." Across the galaxy, on a small blue world called Earth, messages were already being sent. Ships that had been hidden for generations began to wake from their long sleep. Men and women who had lived peaceful lives looked at their children and knew that peace was no longer possible. The universe had ignored humanity's warning. Now it would learn why that warning existed. The news reached Earth 12 hours after Ambassador Kate Morrison left the Concord chamber. Every screen on the planet, every tablet and phone and holographic display carried the same message. The galaxy had refused to help. Humanity was on its own dot in the city of Geneva. The United Human Alliance Parliament gathered in emergency session. The building was old by human standards, built in an age when people still thought wars were fought on a single planet. Now it held the elected leaders of 60 billion, humans spread across 100 worlds. President Marcus Cole stood at the central podium. He was 57 years old, with kind eyes that had grown hard over the past 2 years of watching his people die. He had tried everything to avoid this moment. He had sent diplomats and gifts and messages of peace. He had bent over backward to make humanity appear harmless and friendly. None of it had mattered. "My fellow humans," he began, his voice steady despite the weight pressing down on his heart. "For 200 years, we have tried to be good neighbors in this galaxy. We have shared our music and our stories. We have offered our medicine to species who were sick and our food to those who were hungry. We asked for nothing in return except to be left in peace." He paused, looking out at the thousands of faces before him. "The Vrakthan have killed 400,000 of our people. When we asked the Galactic Concord for help, they told us it was our own fault. They said we were too emotional, too young, too weak to matter." Marcus let those words hang in the air. They were wrong. In the military section of the Parliament, Admiral Diana West sat with her hands folded in her lap. She was 63 years old, a grandmother of 4, a woman who had spent her entire career hoping she would never have to give the orders she was about to give. Her silver hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her uniform was covered with medals she had never wanted to earn. Beside her, Captain Sam Norton was reviewing reports on his tablet. He was 28, young enough to still believe that war could be clean and simple. Diana remembered being that young. It felt like 1,000 years ago. "Admiral," Sam whispered, "if we mobilize the hidden fleets, the Concorde will see our true capabilities. They might declare us a threat to galactic security." Diana did not look at him. "Good. Let them be afraid. Fear is the only language the galaxy understands." Far away, in the orbital shipyards above Mars, Chief Engineer Ben Crawford walked through the massive construction bay. Around him stood ships that officially did not exist. The Concorde had strict rules about military technology. They limited the weapons and engines and shields that younger species were allowed to build. They said it was for safety. In truth, it was to keep the elder races in control. But humans had never been good at following rules. Ben stopped beside the largest ship in the bay. It was called the Relentless, a name that had been chosen very carefully. The ship was half a kilometer long, bristling with weapons that would have made the Concorde Council faint with shock. It had been built in secret over the past 40 years, piece by piece, hidden from the inspectors who thought humans were too primitive to lie. "Wake up, old girl," Ben said softly, placing his hand on the cold metal hull. "It's time." On a research station near the edge of human space, Dr. Laura Bennett sat in her laboratory and stared at the screen in front of her. She was a xenobiologist, a scientist who had spent 15 years studying alien life forms. She knew more about Vrakthan biology than almost any human alive. She knew their weaknesses. Her assistant, a young man named Chris Palmer, entered the lab with a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. "Doctor, the mobilization orders just came through. They want all xenobiology research transferred to military command." Laura nodded slowly. She had known this day would come. She had hoped it would not, but she had prepared for it anyway. That was the thing about humans that the galaxy never seemed to understand. They hoped for the best, but they planned for the worst. "Chris," she said, "what do you know about human history?" He frowned at the strange question. "I know we came from Earth. I know we had a lot of wars before we reached the stars. Do you know what makes us different from other species?" Chris thought about it. "We're emotional? That's what everyone says." Laura smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Yes, we're emotional. We fall in love. We write poetry. We cry at sad stories and laugh at jokes and feel deep pain when we lose the people we care about. The other species think this makes us weak. They think our emotions cloud our judgment and make us easy to defeat." She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. "They're wrong. Our emotions don't make us weak. They make us dangerous. When a human loves something, truly loves it, they will burn down the entire universe to protect it. When a human is angry, truly angry, there is no force in existence that can stop them." Chris felt a chill run down his spine. "What are you saying?" Laura turned to face him. In her eyes, he saw something ancient and terrible, something passed down through countless generations of human survival. "I'm saying that the Vrakthan killed 400,000 of our people. Mothers lost their children. Fathers lost their wives. Entire families were wiped out while the galaxy watched and did nothing." She walked back to her desk and began gathering her research files. "The Concorde thinks we're children playing at civilization. The Vrakthan think we're prey animals who can be hunted for sport. They have no idea what they've done. They have no idea what's coming." Across human space, the hidden war machine began to move. Ships that had waited in darkness for decades powered up their engines. Soldiers who had trained in secret kissed their families goodbye. Scientists and engineers turned their brilliant minds toward destruction. And in every human heart, from Earth to most distant colony, the same fire began to burn. It was not hatred. It was something older and more powerful than hatred. It was the determination of a species that had survived everything the universe had thrown at it. Ice ages and plagues and wars and disasters. They had crawled out of caves and reached for the stars. They had built civilizations and watched them fall and built them again. Now someone had threatened their children. Someone had spilled their blood and laughed about it. The galaxy had made humans angry, and the galaxy was about to learn why that was the worst mistake it had ever made. 1 year had passed since the end of the HFY War. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one had predicted. Old empires that had ruled for millennia now looked over their shoulders with uncertainty. Young species that had been bullied and exploited began to stand a little taller. And at the center of it all stood humanity, the children of Earth, the species that had been dismissed as emotional primitives. The Galactic Concord still existed, but it operated under new rules now, human rules. Ambassador Kate Morrison had been elected to the position of High Arbiter, the first human to hold that ancient title. Some of the elder species had protested. They said humans were too young, too inexperienced, too different to lead the galaxy. Kate had listened to their objections with patience. Then she had reminded them, gently but firmly, what humanity was capable of when pushed. The objections had stopped. Her first act as High Arbiter was to establish the doctrine of universal protection. It was a simple law with simple consequences. Any species that attacked civilian populations would face the combined military response of the entire Concord. No exceptions, no excuses. No hiding behind cultural traditions or ancient grievances. No more children will die because the galaxy was too afraid to act, Kate said when she announced the doctrine. No more colonies will burn while the council debates procedure. The strong do not have the right to prey upon the weak. Not anymore. The doctrine was tested twice in that first year. Twice, human-led fleets arrived to defend the defenseless. Twice, would-be conquerors learned that the new order was not just words on paper. The galaxy was changing, slowly but surely, into something better. On Earth, in a small house on the coast of California, Admiral Diana West sat in her garden and watched the waves crash against the shore. She had retired from the military 6 months after the war ended. Her hands, which had commanded the destruction of entire fleets, now spent their days planting flowers and pulling weeds. Commander Jack Harris visited her sometimes. They would sit together in silence. Two people who understood things that could not be spoken aloud. They had done terrible things in the service of a cause they believed in. They had saved millions of lives by taking thousands. It was not a balance that could ever be made right. It was simply a weight they would carry until they died. Do you think it was worth it? Jack asked her one evening as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and red. Diana was quiet for a long time. I don't know, she finally said. I know that if we hadn't fought, more of our people would have died. I know that the galaxy is safer now than it was before. I know that children are sleeping peacefully tonight because of what we did. She looked down at her hands, calloused and weathered from years of service. But I also know that I gave the orders that killed thousands of beings. HFY warriors who were somebody's sons, somebody's brothers, somebody's fathers. They were our enemies, but they were also people. I will never forget that. Jack nodded slowly. He understood. That was the terrible truth about war. You could be right and still carry the weight of what you had done. You could win and still lose something precious inside yourself. On the former, HFY colony world of New Haven, something remarkable was happening. Dr. Laura Bennett had established a school there, a place where human children and Vrakthan children learned together. It had seemed impossible at first. The wounds of the war were still fresh. Parents on both sides were suspicious and afraid. But children are different from adults. They do not carry the same grudges. They do not remember the same hatreds. Within months, human and Vrakthan children were playing together, learning each other's languages, forming friendships that their parents could not understand. Lavra watched them from her office window one afternoon. Chris Palmer, her former assistant and now the school's deputy director, stood beside her. "Do you think it will last?" he asked. "I don't know," Lavra admitted. "History suggests it won't. People forget. Old hatreds return. Sooner or later, someone will decide that peace is boring and war is glorious." She turned to face him, and there was something fierce in her eyes. "But we have to try anyway. That's what being human means, Chris. We know that good things don't last forever. We know that everything we build will eventually fall. But we build anyway. We hope anyway. We love anyway, even knowing that love will someday bring us grief." She looked back at the children playing in the courtyard. "The galaxy thinks we're dangerous because we can fight. They're wrong. We're dangerous because we never stop hoping, never stop trying, never stop believing that tomorrow can be better than today. That is what truly scares them." In Geneva, President Marcus Cole gave his final address before leaving office. He had aged 20 years in the past 5. His hair was gray, his face lined with grief and exhaustion. He had led humanity through its darkest hour, and it had cost him everything. "My fellow humans," he said, his voice carrying across the planet and beyond, "we have come through the fire. We did not ask for this war. We did not want it. But when it came, we faced it together, and we survived." He paused, gathering his strength. "Let our victory be not just a warning, but a promise. We will protect the innocent. We will stand against tyranny. We will never forget what we are capable of, both the darkness and the light. We have shown the galaxy what happens when humans are pushed too far. Now, let us show them what happens when humans are given the chance to build, to create, to love." He looked directly into the camera. "The universe has finally learned why humans warned them not to make us angry. But I hope, with all my heart, that they will also learn why humans hope. Because even in our fury, we never forgot how to be kind. Even in our victory, we never forgot how to be merciful. That is what makes us human. That is what makes us strong." High Arbiter Kate Morrison stood on the observation deck of Nexus Prime, looking out at the infinite sea of stars. Admiral Sam Norton, promoted after the war, stood beside her in his dress uniform. They had both lost so much in the past years. Friends and family, innocence and peace. But they had gained something too. A galaxy that finally saw them as equals. A future worth fighting for. "Do you think they'll remember?" Sam asked quietly. "The lesson we taught them?" Kate smiled sadly. "For a while. A few centuries, maybe. Then they'll forget. Some new species will rise up and decide that humans are weak because we create art and raise families and cry at beautiful sunsets. And then?" Kate turned to face him. In her eyes was the same fire that had burned in humanity since they first looked up at the stars and dreamed of touching them. "And then we will remind them, as many times as it takes, until the universe finally understands that the most dangerous species in existence is also the most hopeful. Until they learn that you should never, ever make humans angry." She looked back at the stars, those ancient lights that had watched the rise and fall of countless civilizations. "But more than that," she said softly, "I hope they learn that you should also never make humans sad. Because we will move heaven and earth to be happy again. And we will take the whole universe with us." The stars burned on, eternal and indifferent. But among them now moved a species that was neither. A species that cared too much, felt too deeply, hoped too stubbornly. A species called humanity, and the galaxy would never be the same. War Chief Crothax stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the stars pass by through the main viewport. He was the greatest warrior the Vrakthan Empire had produced in 1,000 years. His body was covered with scars from 100 battles, and his trophy hall held the skulls of enemies from 12 different species. Today, he would add human skulls to his collection. How long until we reach the human colony? He growled at his navigation officer. 2 hours, War Chief. Colony 7 Delta. Our scouts report a population of 50,000. Mostly farmers and their families. Crothax made a sound of pleasure deep in his throat. Farmers were soft. They ran and screamed and begged for mercy. They made excellent prey. Signal the fleet, he commanded. We hunt today. His fleet consisted of 60 warships, each one carrying hundreds of warriors eager for blood. The humans had complained to the Galactic Concord about the raids, but the Concord had done nothing. Of course, they had done nothing. The Vrakthan were ancient and powerful. The humans were young and weak. The galaxy belonged to the strong. But as the Vrakthan fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel near Colony 7 Delta, Crothax felt something strange. A feeling he had not experienced in a very long time. Doubt. War Chief, his sensor officer said, his voice uncertain. We are detecting ships. Human ships. Many of them. Crothax leaned forward. How many? 47, War Chief. They are. They are waiting for us. On the bridge of the human dreadnought Relentless, Admiral Diana West stood with her hands clasped behind her back. Around her, officers moved with quiet efficiency. There was no panic, no shouting, no confusion. Just cold, focused purpose. Admiral, Lieutenant Megan Torres reported from her station. The Vrakthan fleet has arrived. 60 vessels. They're forming into attack formation. Diana nodded. She had studied Vrakthan tactics for 30 years. She knew how they fought, how they thought, how they died. Open a channel to their flagship. The main screen flickered, and then War Chief Crothax appeared. He was massive, easily 3 meters tall, with scales the color of dried blood and eyes that gleamed with predatory intelligence. Human female, Crothax growled. You dare to challenge me with your little fleet. I have crushed empires that were old when your species was still crawling in the mud. Diana's expression did not change. War Chief Crothax, I am required by human military law to offer you one chance to surrender. This is that chance. Take your ships and leave human space. Never return. Crothax laughed. It was a terrible sound, like bones breaking. Surrender? To prey? You amuse me, female. When this battle is over, I will take your skull as a trophy. I will hang it in my hall and tell my children the story of the foolish human who thought she could fight the Vrakthan. Diana let him finish. Then she spoke, and her voice was ice. War Chief, you have killed 400,000 of my people. Men who were working to feed their families. Women who were teaching their children to read. Babies who never got to take their first steps. You murdered them and laughed about it. She took a single step forward. I am not going to capture your ships. I am not going to take prisoners. I am not going to show mercy. Do you understand? This is not a battle. This is a reckoning. Crothax stared at her for a long moment. Something flickered in his eyes. Not fear, exactly. He had never felt fear. But something close to it. Something that whispered warnings in a voice he did not recognize. You dare to threaten me? He snarled. No, Diana said quietly. I am telling you what is about to happen. You started this war by killing our children. We are going to end it by killing you. She nodded to Lieutenant Torres. Close the channel. All ships, weapons free. The Battle of Colony 7 Delta. lost at exactly 7 minutes. The Vrakthan had been the terror of the galaxy for 10,000 years. Their ships were fast and deadly, their warriors fierce and brave. They had never lost a major engagement. They believed they were invincible. They were wrong. Human weapons tore through Vrakthan shields like they were made of paper. Plasma lances burned holes through hulls that had been designed to withstand any attack. Missiles that were supposed to be impossible to build found their targets with perfect accuracy and detonated with enough force to crack planets. But it was not just the technology that decided the battle. It was the humans themselves. Captain Sam Norton commanded the destroyer Swift. He was 28 years old. He had a wife named Jenny and 2 daughters who had made him a card before he deployed. The card said, "Come home safe, Daddy," and was decorated with drawings of stars and hearts. Sam thought about that card as he gave the order to fire. He thought about his daughters sleeping safely in their beds back on Earth. He thought about the children on Colony 12 Echo who would never sleep in their beds again. He destroyed 17 Vrakthan ships that day. 17 vessels full of warriors who had crossed the void to murder his people. He felt sorrow for the lives he was taking. He felt no guilt. He was a father protecting his children, and he would have destroyed 1,000 more ships if that was what it took. Across the human fleet, the story was the same. Men and women who had never wanted to fight discovered something terrible within themselves. A capacity for violence that they had inherited from ancestors who had survived when survival seemed impossible. They cried as they pulled the triggers. They prayed as they launched the missiles. And they did not hesitate. When the battle ended, only 3 Vrakthan ships remained. They fled into the darkness of space, their engines screaming, their crews too shocked to understand what had happened. War Chief Crothax was not among the survivors. His flagship had been the first to fall, torn apart by concentrated fire from the Relentless and her escorts. His trophy hull would never receive another skull. Admiral Diana West stood on her bridge and looked at the wreckage floating in the void. 60 ships reduced to debris and ash. Thousands of warriors who had thought themselves immortal, now dead. She felt no triumph, only a deep, terrible weariness. "Signal the Concorde," she said quietly. "Tell them what happened here. Tell them this is only the beginning." Lieutenant Torres looked at her with wide eyes. "Admiral, what will they do?" Diana turned away from the viewport. "They will be afraid. For the first time in their ancient lives, they will know what it feels like to face something they do not understand." She walked toward her quarters, her footsteps heavy on the metal deck. And then they will learn that fear is the appropriate response. The recording of the Battle of Colony 7 Delta spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Within days, every species in the Concorde had watched it. They watched the human ships tear through the Vrakthan fleet. They watched 60 warships die in 7 minutes. They watched the greatest warriors the galaxy had ever known running for their lives, and they were terrified. High Arbiter Xylox called an emergency session of the Concorde Council. The Great Chamber was more crowded than it had been in centuries. Species that had not attended a meeting in 1,000 years sent representatives. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. How had this happened? How had humanity, the youngest and supposedly weakest species in the Concorde, destroyed an entire Vrakthan fleet? Ambassador Kate Morrison walked into the chamber with her head held high. This time, she was not alone. Behind her stood a full honor guard of human marines in their black combat armor. They moved like shadows, silent and dangerous, and every eye in the room followed them. High Arbiter Xylox's crystal form was dimmer than usual. He had not slept since the news arrived. For the first time in 3,000 years, he did not know what to do. "Ambassador Morrison," he said, his voice lacking its usual confidence, You destroyed an entire Vrakthan war fleet. 60 ships. Thousands of warriors. In minutes. Kate stopped at the speaking platform and looked up at him. Yes, this is unprecedented. The Vrakthan have been the dominant military power in this region of space for 10 millennia. No one has ever defeated them in open battle. Until now, Kate said. Envoy Throw of the Emirian Collective floated forward, his gaseous body trembling with agitation. You have hidden weapons from the Concord. This is a violation of 17 treaties. You were supposed to submit all military research for review. You were supposed to limit your fleet to defensive vessels only. Kate's smile was cold. Were we? The same treaties that were supposed to protect our colonies from attack. The same treaties you refused to enforce while our people were being murdered? That was a different situation entirely, Xylox began, was it? Kate stepped forward, and something in her eyes made the ancient arbiter lean back. You told us we were too young, too emotional, too weak to matter. You told us to accept our losses and move on. You left us alone to face the Vrakthan with nothing but kind words and empty promises. She gestured, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed images of human military installations, shipyards hidden inside asteroids, research facilities buried deep underground, weapons platforms disguised as civilian stations, an entire war machine that had been built over generations, hidden in plain sight. While you were dismissing us as children, Kate continued, we were preparing. We studied your technology and improved upon it. We developed weapons you said were impossible. We built a fleet that could stand against any force in the galaxy. The chamber fell silent. The elder species stared at the display with something approaching horror. They had been so certain of their superiority. They had been so convinced that humanity was harmless. They had been completely, catastrophically wrong. Dr. Ryan Abbott stepped forward from the human delegation. He was the chief scientist of the Alliance military, a quiet man who preferred laboratories to politics. But Kate had asked him to be here because the council needed to understand exactly what they were dealing with. If I may explain, Ryan said, adjusting his glasses. The Concord has always assumed that younger species are naturally inferior. You limit their technology because you believe they are not ready for it. But humanity has a unique characteristic that you failed to consider. He looked around the chamber at the ancient beings who had ruled the galaxy for so long. We learn very quickly, and we are extremely motivated. High Arbiter Xylox found his voice. What do you want? Are you here to threaten the Concord? To demand submission? Kate shook her head. No, we are not conquerors. We never wanted any of this. All we ever asked was to live in peace and to be treated with basic respect. You refused to give us that. The Vrakthan attacked our people, and you did nothing. She paused, letting her words sink in. We are here to make sure that never happens again. Not to us, not to any species. The following weeks proved that humanity's victory at Colony 7 Delta was not a fluke. The Vrakthan Empire, enraged by their defeat, sent 3 more fleets against human space. None of them returned. Human weapons and tactics were simply too advanced, too devastating, too precise. Admiral Diana West commanded the human forces with grim efficiency. She took no pleasure in the destruction she caused. But she did not hesitate either. Every Vrakthan ship that fell was one less threat to the children sleeping safely on human worlds. After the 3rd fleet was destroyed, the Human Alliance sent a message to the Vrakthan homeworld. It was simple and direct. Surrender unconditionally or face total destruction. The Vrakthan Emperor, a proud warrior who had never bowed to anyone, chose to fight. He gathered every ship his empire possessed and led them, himself into battle against the human fleet. The Battle of the Vrakthan Nebula lasted 4 hours. When it was over, The Vrakthan Empire's military power was broken forever. Their emperor was dead. Their fleets were scattered debris floating in the void. Their 10,000-year reign of terror had ended. But what shocked the galaxy most was what happened next. The humans did not conquer the Vrakthan homeworld. They did not enslave the survivors. They did not burn their cities or slaughter their civilians. Instead, they offered fair terms. The Vrakthan would surrender their military. They would pay reparations for the colonies they had destroyed. They would submit to monitoring to ensure they never threatened anyone again. But they would keep their homeworld. They would keep their culture. They would be allowed to live in peace, as long as they extended that same peace to others. Ambassador Kate Morrison delivered the terms personally. "We are not monsters," she told the Vrakthan delegation. "We did not want this war. We did not enjoy winning it. We destroyed your fleets because we had no choice, not because we wanted to. If there had been any other way, we would have taken it." The Vrakthan ambassador, a female named Vectra who had lost 2 sons in the war, stared at her with confusion. "You had us defeated. You could have destroyed everything we have. Why show mercy?" Kate's expression softened slightly. "Because we remember what it felt like to be weak. We remember being afraid. And we refused to become the thing we fought against." The Vrakthan Empire surrendered 3 days later. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. In all their long history, they had never seen anything like this. A species that could destroy armies and then offer kindness to the survivors. A people who could be terrible in battle and gentle in peace. High Arbiter. Xylox looked at the reports on his desk and finally understood what the Phylixian delegate had tried to tell him after that first meeting. Humans were not weak because they had emotions. They were strong because of them. Their love made them fight. Their compassion made them stop fighting when the battle was won. They were the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever encountered, and also perhaps the best.